Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. And is my custom, let me just, there we go, get the volume there. Yeah, so we're going to do Big Trouble in Little Limon, Part 2. And we'll just start with this.
When some wild-eyed 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps the back of your favorite head up against a barroom wall, and he looks you crooked in the eye and he asks you if you've paid your dues, well, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye and you remember what old Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail. You're out of your mind, Wang. God bless you. It's all in the reflexes. Wait a minute. I'm a reasonable guy, but I've just experienced some very unreasonable things.
Depends on how you look at it.
The hell it does. So somebody, I don't care who, tell me what is going on.
The truth?
I can take it.
We don't know.
This is gonna take Cracker Jack timing, Wang.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
Whoa! I love working nights. Wait,
Don't get up. Phone company. All right, boys, where's the main panel at? Probably through here, huh?
All right, we're almost out of here. Now, from here on, it gets pretty normal. Offices, storerooms, a nice false front. I count to 3. I open that door, and we move out.
Everybody got that?
Ready? Follow the leader. 1, 2, 3. We may be trapped. Come out no more.
What? Huh? What'll come out no more?
Come on.
Damn it.
Were they real?
Yeah. Dress for Lopan's wedding.
What's in the flask, egg? Magic potion?
Yeah.
Thought so. Good. What do we do? Drink it?
Yeah.
Good. I thought so.
Oh, the 6 demon bag.
Terrific. A 6-demon bag. Sensational. What's in it, Egg?
Wind, fire, all that kind of thing.
Here's to the Army and Navy and the battles they have won. Here's to America's colors, the colors that never run.
May the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
Ah.
Feel pretty good. I'm not scared at all. I just feel kind of invincible.
Me too. I got a very positive attitude about this.
Good, me too.
Yeah.
Is it getting hot in here, or is it just me? Ah, you know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this? Who? Jack Burton. Me. Old Jack always says, what the hell?
Well, there you go. A little bit of Jack Burton to get us started. So yesterday I told you about a lot of the, I don't know what you'd call it, the sort of freaky, weird stuff that happened writing Stardust Ranch, and we were just getting into the light of darkness, and I told you about the man in black, and like I said, and by the way, the man in black appeared. You know what? I'm going to leave that alone. There's some things I've been told not to talk about, and I'm just going to leave that be. Sorry to be a tease, but I'm just going to let that one little detail be. Now, the main thing that happened writing The Light of Darkness was at a certain point in the book, I don't know how to put this. Like, some of these experiences are actually hard to describe. I went into the dark world, okay? And I don't really know what the dark world is. I mean, when I say I don't know what it is, I mean I don't know how to correlate it to the stuff we know and the stuff we've documented as a species. I'd say maybe the closest thing that I could describe it as is the void in Buddhism. In fact, I'm going to look that up. What is the void as described in Buddhism? Okay, in Buddhism, the void, often translated as sunyata, emptiness, refers to the absence of inherent existence in all phenomenon. It's not about complete nothingness, but rather the lack of a fixed, independent self-nature. Everything is seen as arising dependently, connected by cause and effect, and ultimately lacking a permanent essence. Here's a more detailed explanation. So I'm going to read this because this is kind of similar to what I experienced. No inherent existence. The void concept challenges the idea that things have a self-contained, unchanging identity. Instead, everything is seen as a process, a dynamic interplay of conditions. Interdependence. The void highlights the interconnectedness of all things. Everything arises and exists because of other things, not in isolation. Not nihilistic. The void is not about denying the existence of things, but rather about understanding their temporary, conditioned nature. A path to enlightenment. By recognizing the emptiness of inherent existence, practitioners can detach from attachment and delusion, leading to a deeper understanding of reality and ultimately enlightenment. Madhyamaka school. The void is a central concept in the Madhyamaka school of Mahayana Buddhism. That's the Chinese version of Buddhism, by the way, if you didn't know. And I know that because I lived in Taiwan. Particularly as elaborated in the teachings of Nagarjuna. Not a state of nothingness. While the void can be understood as emptiness, it's not the same as complete nothingness or absence of all things. So I did not go into the void. The dark world is not the void. I had never looked that up before, but it just popped into my head tonight. The place I went was not the void. I did not see the interconnectedness of things. The place I went, all that remained was the basest sense of your own existence. You couldn't form thoughts. You could not really feel anything. It was as though you existed and you had been zombified. It was not distressing. It was, even though there was nothing there was nothing really frightening or disturbing there either. It just was this endless canvas of blackness. That's all I can describe. And it felt like it went into every cell of my being. It felt like a kind of an initiation. And I knew although I just said you don't really get thoughts there, but when I came out and I started to reflect on the experience, and I was in the dark world, or in what's called the darkness, for 3 days. And I remember the experience was like, here I am, my body and everything, and I was to the right. I was beside myself, which is the euphemism for madness too, but I felt like I was beside myself. And I continued to write through those 3 days. In fact, going into the darkness was necessary to write certain parts of the book, and the part I was working on especially, because I couldn't really feel anything to write this part of the book. So how did I write it if thoughts couldn't arise? I don't know. I don't know. I really don't understand that. Now, this is going to sound weird. I felt a tremendous sense of power in the darkness. I felt like I could do anything. That all restrictions that are morally inherent in a human being were lifted. I could do anything from there. I could murder 100 people. I wouldn't feel good. I wouldn't feel bad. I would still feel the icy coolness of the dark world. And when I say icy coolness, I don't mean that in a negative way. In fact, I will say that the dark world was very comfortable. It was almost embryonic. It was almost like a dark samadhi, a state of existence where you become aware of your mind, unaware of your mind and your body, but you do not lose I don't know what the language is here. You do not lose self. Like, you still know you exist. But you know, all of us, we do these things that sort of reinforce our existence. We all do this, right? It's a form of psychic restructuring. We have mirrors around us, and those mirrors send reflections back. I don't mean literal mirrors like you shave in front of or something like that. I mean, my wife is a mirror. I get a psychic reconstruction of myself given back to me every time I interact with my wife, because she projects her understanding and her identity of me onto me. Now, that may sound weird, but until you've started meditating a few hours a day, you're not going to understand this, really. I mean, you can understand the words, and I'm not using big words, but what I'm really saying, there might be just a handful of you that understand this. If Bob watches this podcast, he'll just be going, yeah. And a lot of people actually go into the darkness. Not a lot. Like, I don't know what percentage of the human race. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000. Once you've been in the dark world, you can recognize other people who've been in it. And I know I sound like a fortune cookie. I know how fucking ridiculous this sounds. Okay? But it happened. It was a real consciousness experience. Now, I was being watched and I was being protected by Bob and Bob's teacher at the time. Very incredible, beautiful, sweet, illuminated man by the name of Keahi, who lives in Hawaii. And I think they pushed me into the dark world, because they knew I needed to go there to understand the book. I never asked Bob. Maybe he'll watch this podcast and call me and tell me. But about halfway through, like day 2, Bob called me, and he goes, and he could see everything. Like he and Keahi were psychically watching everything that was going on while I was writing this book. because I had to be protected. And I had a lot of other beings around me when I was writing The Light of Darkness, particularly the Lemurians. And the Lemurians are an ancient race that lived on this planet. And we don't really know much about the Lemurians. They're not really part of the lore. But they're sort of back now. They came back a number of years ago. And I think even where they are now, they live once you've lived someplace, you can portal back to it in consciousness. Okay, so the Lemurians lived on this planet, so they can always come back and visit in spiritual or astral or another body's form. There's more bodies than just the astral, right? And some of the bodies we have they're just light, right? All these things you read about and you hear about, oh, these light beings visited me. We too become light beings. We morph into light beings, okay? So the Lemurians were around me, and I suspect there was another race watching this. I'll talk about them later on in the podcast because I gotta keep things in sequence. But like I said, I was in the dark world about 72 hours. Rosemary knew something was going on. She could just see it in my face. All she did was bring me food. She didn't really talk to me that much for 3 days. And I could talk, but it was like, I don't know. It was like if somebody came up to me, if Rosemary came up and asked me something, I would just go. I'd hear the question, I'd nod my head. You want a cup of coffee? Yeah, I would just nod my head. I was almost like completely nonverbal. And I remember this sense of intoxication in the dark world. It was like, that I think Shakespeare originally said it, but it's been popularized by Hunter S. Thompson. He who makes a beast of himself unburdens himself from being a man. Now, I wasn't made a beast, but I was unburdened from being a man. Okay? Now, I wasn't ruled by desire. I had no desire. I hardly ate. I hardly drank coffee. I hardly smoked cigars. I smoked cigars at the time. All of my normal habits were just sort of gone. Or if I did them just sort of mechanistically. Again, like I was beside myself and somebody else was doing it. The only time I've ever experienced that was the 2 weeks after I had COVID. And I had no smell or taste. And that the way I engaged with my sensory life, eating, drinking coffee, and smoking cigars, those 2 weeks after COVID were similar to the 3 days in the dark world. Although I don't know how to explain it. And I know I sound like a fucking idiot, but some of these experiences are so hard to lay words to. Okay? I don't know what the dark world is. I know that if after you left your body, you got put there, like when you're in a body and your consciousness is in the dark world, it's empowering. But I got the sense that if you went there without a body to anchor you, it would be worse than hell. It felt like I was abandoned by everything, by all my memories, by my sense of myself, my connection to the Creator, my fear of anything negative. I felt as though I had been liberated from being human. And then about halfway through, Bob called me up on Skype. He says, "Hey, buddy, we're watching you from over here. I've never seen anybody go this dark. Do you want me and Kiahi to pull you out?" And I said, "No, just like, no, I'm going to finish this chapter. And I had this autonomous way of speaking. There was no inflection in my voice. There was no personality. Rosemary picked up on it. And she asked me when I came back to form, like day 4, she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "It's the book, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What's that book about?" And I said, "It's worse than the devil." And Rosemary went, "Oh, okay." And this was before I wrote The Devil in Us, and I realized through that book and through the experiences therein that the devil was actually a divine being. In many ways, you could call the devil the angel of the earth. Okay? So we got the devil all wrong, but this was something different. And if you went into this world without a body, I imagine the only thing I can think of in popular culture is if you remember the Superman movies, the original one with Christopher Reeves and Marlon Brando, or the second one when General Zor comes to Earth, or the remake with Henry Cavill, I think his name is. And those renegade Kryptonian generals they put into that hibernation. That's the only thing I might be able to compare it to. But when they came out of hibernation, they described it as psychological torture because all of their thoughts and everything were still there. And this was not that. It was, how would I put this? You know how you say people go off grid? Like they stop using all ID. They go live in the woods, like the Unabomber. They go live in a cabin somewhere, and you have no connection with the world, and all record of you sort of disappears. It was like that, but cosmically off the grid. All right, so that was the weirdest thing that happened to me writing The Light of Darkness. I mean, after The Man in Black. Although the 3 days in the dark world was way more intense than The Man in Black. And The Man in Black only lasted about 20 minutes. So Bob said, "You want me to pull you out?" And I said, "No." And it was very weird because Bob was very proud of me. He was like, "This is a good thing. Like, people should experience what you're experiencing now. And not many people can, right? There's a lot of people who, if they went in, I think most people, if they went into this dark world, they'd be scarred for life, or they'd never come back. They'd have to be institutionalized or something. And I'm not trying to, separate myself or anything, and I don't know for sure, because I don't know anybody other than Bob and Kia who's ever been in the dark world before. I imagine that a lot of these people in the left-hand path, a lot of these initiates can go into the dark world. Now, Bob told me when you get used to the dark world, a lot of people are in darkness, but unconsciously. They're in the dark world. Like, part of them is in the dark world. Maybe their unconscious mind. And what that does is it puts their conscience and all of their humanity in a freezer. And then they can go out and do these heinous things to become billionaires or whatever. But the front part of them is still alive. My entry into the dark world was total. Okay? And it was freaky. Now, another thing happened to Rosemary while I was writing The Light of Darkness. She kept waking up because I have like 4 different buildings. Well, with the sauna, I have 5 different buildings up here, like 5 separate, completely independent structures where you open a door and you go in. I got the big house in the back, which has 3 separate bedrooms and a big front balcony and a porch and 2 porches and a little swimming pool. I call it a Roman bath. Kids love it. And Rosemary was sleeping in the back house, and I would be up writing most nights till like 2 or 3 in the morning. I've always preferred to write at night. I don't know what it is about the nighttime, but I've always preferred to write at night. And I'll go till 2 or 3 in the morning. I'll sleep till 9. I'll get up. I'll get into my day. And then as the day goes on and my psychic energy builds up, because I start thinking about the book. Once I start a book, it's total OCD. You never seen anything like it in your life. I can't really think about anything. I can watch a bit of TV and zone out, but I'm always thinking about the book. And then so what I do is I build up the energy during the day. I let everything start to come into me. And then Rosemary goes to bed around 8:30 and I start writing right away. And I'll write from about 8:30 till anywhere 2, 3, sometimes 4 in the morning. I think on that book I was going right till the sun came up too. And Rosemary was going through her own journey when I was writing The Light of Darkness. And she kept telling me that there was a giant at the house. And I said, how big? She says, oh, I don't know. She said it in meters, like 10 meters high or something, which would be about 30 feet. And she said she could feel the earth vibrating when it walked around the house. She brought it up 2 or 3 times. And I thought she was just having some kind of a psychotic break related to the intense energy coming off of me, which was, I imagine, some kind of psychic radioactivity while I was writing that book. And I felt bad for her. And I kept telling her, this book will be done soon. Don't worry. This book will be done soon. And she started to tune into it. And it just happened with this book, The Light of Darkness. The only thing she experienced with Stardust Ranch was the light and walking through the portal. Now, I want you to stop and think about what it would be like being my wife up here. Okay? My wife is starting to think, who in the fuck did I marry? I've got white lights showing up in our bedroom. There's a giant walking around the house. My husband is completely aware of all these things and says, don't worry, it's related to the book. And she's just going through all of this like a trooper. And then Bob subsequently told me that he and Kiahi had actually sent a giant to also protect me writing this book. There were a lot of things that did not want this book written, The Light of Darkness. Okay? And so now the giant was on the astral, but my wife is profoundly lucid on the astral. I mean, you know, my wife can read my mind. Okay? She's very, very lucid on the astral. By the way, Rosemary's had 2 near-death experiences herself. One as a child, and one as a young adult in her early 20s. And the second one happened in the jungle. And she died in the jungle, and she was dead for 30 minutes, then came back to life. Okay? A lot of really weird stuff around my wife, too. Okay? So she just went through this book like a trooper. And she went through The Light of Stardust Ranch like a trooper as well. So that's my story of the Dark World. Let me see if there's anything I'm forgetting. I don't think I can give it any more descriptors. And I don't think anybody can understand it unless you go there. And I wouldn't go there unless you're studying with a spiritual teacher who can put you in and pull you out. And I'm sure there's certain paths that can do that. Bob, at the time, had the ability to do it. He probably still does, but I don't recommend you ask him to take you to the Dark World. Okay? There's no need to go there. But there's a tremendous sense of power there. Like, I felt like a dark superhero or something. Okay? And then there was the giant going around the house. And then I had... There was still... When I was writing The Light of Darkness, some of the stuff from Stardust Ranch crept back. So remember how I told you, I think I've told you guys on my podcast about Cynthia Crawford, the first human-alien hybrid, right? created in 1947 by the OSS, allegedly with alien DNA. Now I've looked, and they've scrubbed her off the internet quite a bit, but you can still find her. Okay. Now the funny thing is, because I wrote a chapter about her in Stardust Ranch, I had 3 different people from around the world send me emails, and then I ended up talking to them on Skype. And Cynthia used to do sculptures of the bust of an extraterrestrial race. So you could call her, and I think she charged like $5,000 for this or something. But she would talk to you and determine what she called your galactic family was, what race you belonged to. And she would make you a bust of that extraterrestrial race, their head. And she'd FedEx it to you. And the instructions were, you were supposed to sleep with the bust for the first week you got it, okay? And sleep alone. So if you're married, don't sleep with your wife, sleep alone, and sleep with the bust of the extraterrestrial. Now, I ended up speaking to 3 people who received these busts. One of them became my friend for a while. I've lost touch with them now. But 2 of them threw the bust out. It was like all of the Insidious movies, 1 to 6, however many they've done, in one go, sleeping with that bust. Like horrible dreams, really disturbing paranormal activity, just like an unbelievably negative assault. You would think you had gone to the 7th circle of hell. And I think one guy took his out to a field and put kerosene on it and lit it on fire. He thought that it was too evil to exist. Another guy just threw his in the garbage, and the garbage truck came and picked it up. And the other guy, the 3rd guy, when he got his bust, the first night he slept with it, he woke up in the middle of the night, went to the end of the bed, sat on the end of the bed, and had a 2-hour conversation with his mother, who had already been dead for 3 or 4 years. Okay? So why do I bring this up? Because remember I told you when they did this, they did this with these alien human hybrids. For some reason, I can't give you the scientific or occult reason why, but they could only be created in twins. Okay? And Cynthia's sister, Susan, was so evil they had to put her down. They literally had to exterminate her. Okay? And I didn't know anything about Cynthia's sister. I learned about Cynthia's sister writing The Light of Darkness, because it came in psychically. Because I think the book The Light of Darkness somehow resonated with that energy of Cynthia and her sister, because it's just a very negative frequency, right? So, by the way, that's an interesting segue for the Talamanca Review. Your extra-dimensional experience will match your frequency. So if you go extra-dimensional through any kind of spiritual or shamanic practice, and at some point in your life you go negative, those channels don't shut down. Those doors don't close. It's just that the things that come through them will be negative, because that's what you're attracting. So when I was writing The Light of Darkness, I started getting these emails, these super creepy emails from a woman named Susan Crawford. And I go, what the fuck is this? And I say they were weird because I would just get the email and there would be no subject and no body to the email. And I'm going, what the fuck is this? Sometimes they would be in my inbox. Sometimes they would be in my junk folder. It was very, very weird. And it was the third guy who was talking to his mom at the end of the bed with one of the busts. I told him, and he had actually been Cynthia Crawford's friend for the last 10 years of her life. And he described her as a very loving woman, but nobody who got those busts had a good story to tell. Nor did this guy, even though he maintained contact with Cynthia. And I was talking to him, and I told him about these emails. I said, I keep getting these weird emails from somebody named Susan Crawford. And he goes, oh my God, Bruce, that was Cynthia's sister. And this is like smack dab in the middle of Light of Darkness. I'm going, oh, fuck, I got to deal with this now, too? So that was it. You know, it was just unbelievably freaky. Unbelievably freaky. Sorry, I just had to pour a coffee there. So, and then the hardest part about Light of Darkness was closing it out. Like a lot of people, not a lot, but a few people complained about the ending. And I say to those people, how do you close a book like that? There's no dramatic arc. All narrative closure is based on the resolution between negative and positive polarities. You apply that to Shakespeare, apply it to Charles Dickens, apply it to Ernest Hemingway, apply it to any writer you want. It is impossible to close a story without resolving your negative and positive dynamic, okay? There was really no positive dynamic in The Light of Darkness. And so I ended it just talking about a town that saved itself by firing all of its officials in Mexico. And before they did that, it was a Mexican town that had a large native population. It was run by the cartels. They had rapes and murders every day. They fired the mayor and they fired the police force, and they took over the town themselves, the natives, armed. And they went for a number of years, and they didn't have a single rape or a single murder. And then the federal government in Mexico City made them reinstate the municipal structure, and then all the cartels came back. And I thought that was the perfect story to close the book with, because the book is in a lot of ways about how they've used institutions to get where they are today. Okay? Because to get as dark as we are now as a society, human beings would not do it on their own. They had to be told to do it in honeycombed information modules and just trained to do something like a SWAT team that you're trained to kill. And you assume for your own moral and spiritual well-being that your superiors are correct in the directives they're giving to you. This is a life and death situation, and you're spiritually correct in dispatching lethal force. That's the whole principle of the social contract in a nutshell, right? This is how cops sleep at night. This is how soldiers sleep at night. Okay? I was ordered to do it. Chain of command told me to do it. I have to believe it was for the greater good, and that human life had to be taken, and I did not transgress. Okay? I did not sin. I did not do anything wrong. Well, as you begin to get into these institutions, you start to figure out they're fundamentally satanic, and they're using these people and scapegoating them spiritually by making them do these horrible things and having them believe it's being done for a righteous cause. And it isn't. I mean, the last 30 years of American military warfare has not been righteous. It has been the house cleaning for the shitheels that are genociding the Palestinians. Okay? And a lot of soldiers know that now, and they're angry, and they're depressed, and they have to go through their own healing cycle. Okay? But that's how they do it. That's how the whole system works, you know? So that's how I ended the book. And what I was trying to say in that book was, look, the only way out of this is to stop living within these institutions. And I've done it. I live within a governmental structure in a Central American country, but there's really no government up here. And everybody sort of gets along, and the good and the bad are here, as I've told you many times. And even the bad when you live with them in the country like this, they're actually quite good. They're actually quite good. All right. Should I just do a shorter one tonight at 40 minutes, or should I don't think I have time to get into The Devil in Us. Or maybe I do. Yeah, maybe I'll just do another 15 minutes and sum up. This will be a 2-part series. Big Trouble in Little Limon. Now, of all the books, the one that was the most personal and the most cathartic and healing for me personally was The Devil in Us, because it was my story. And I had a lot of darkness in my life that I'd buried away, a lot of trauma that I just sort of buried. And this book resurrected it all and put me through a tremendous healing process. And the irony of this book is this was all guided by and directed by what we call the satanic forces and the demonic legions. Okay? So I was literally put in contact with demons. Okay? I could see them, and they're not what people think they are. They're freaky to look at. Okay? I'll tell you that for nothing. When you see them in your mind's eye, you just kind of like, the first time you see them, wow. So they kind of, I've said this before, but they kind of look like the way death looked in Ingmar Bergman's film The Seventh Seal with Max von Sydow in the 50s, where the knight coming home from the Crusades plays a game of chess beside the sea with the devil, or with death, the angel of death. They're very tall, like 8 or 9 feet tall. They're thin. Their smiles are very much like a demonic clown. Okay, they're very, you know what captured it really, really well? And I'm starting to have a lot of questions about Christopher Nolan, the director, because he knows a lot of stuff. It sneaks out in his films, okay, if you know what to look for. They look a little bit the way Heath Ledger looked as the Joker in The Dark Knight Rises. They have these incredible, exaggerated smiles. Their faces may or may not have makeup on them, and if they do have makeup on, it's usually around their mouths. And I don't know why they do that or why they appear that way. They have these grins like the Cheshire Cat, okay, from Alice in Wonderland. And it just goes way up like this. They have these piercing eyes, and they strike fear when you meet them. Okay, they do strike fear. Now, when they came in to work on the book, they did their very best not to scare me. It was a peaceful thing, okay? And this relationship was set up by Bob, okay? Now, if you go back and you watch some of Bob's earlier videos, when he was just starting to podcast, or, he will tell you, he's very open about it. He's known the devil most of his life. Bob and the devil are, I don't know if I'd say friends, but something like that, okay? And this comes to people who come to a realization of what the negative principality is. The same thing happened to the Buddha. The Buddha was able to sit and talk to the Lord of Hell, which in Buddhism is called Marpa, which would be our Satan, okay? And this was visibly seen by Buddha's students. And when Buddha was talking to Marpa on the hill, none of the other students would go near Buddha, even if they had to talk to him, because nobody could tolerate the presence and vibration of Marpa other than Buddha. But Buddha had come to realize that this was a necessary mechanism in the biosphere and psychosphere of human affairs. And that, in fact, Marpa, Satan, whatever you want to call it, is a divinely appointed position in the original cosmology of this setup. And this has nothing to do with the archons, nothing to do with the false matrix. This is separate, running parallel to it. Okay? So, the devil in us began with my father coming to me in a meditation after being dead 11 months and after me receiving no contact from my father. Now, many people will get a dream in the first 48 hours after somebody dies. They'll get a parting dream from the spirit. This is allowed by the cosmology. Okay? You have to be a little bit sensitive, but not super sensitive. It's usually a starter spiritual experience for a lot of people. People who don't pray, don't meditate, somebody they were very close to passing, a father, a mother. If they get the visitation dream, then they may start going to church or meditating or something. It's a very spiritual experience. And I had been meditating my whole life. I had had many friends who had passed and who had come to say goodbye to me. I had one fellow, one of my best friends, he died in 2022. He was up here for 5 days. I would be sitting on the front porch talking to him, crying, my eyes full of tears. My wife would come around the corner and say, "Who are you talking to?" I'd say, "I'm talking to my buddy who died 3 days ago." Now, remember, she'd already been through all the books. So, other than the devil in us, okay? So she'd already been through all of the books. So she was used to it. If I said, now, if I'm going to say something maybe a little culturally insensitive here, or maybe even racist, but racist against my own people. If I was married to a white woman in Canada who had a master's degree in something, she would not have gone through. She would have checked me into an institution. Even halfway through Stardust Ranch, she would have had the paddy wagon come and pick me up, have me doped up with Thorazine, and put into an asylum for a month to see if I could get back to what they deemed normal. But up here, these mountain women who've been raised and lived in the jungle and the rainforest their whole lives, they're completely different. Right? Their breadth of experience is much bigger. So, my buddy Alan, he spent 5 days up here. It was unbelievable. I could talk to him, and then after the 5th day, he disappeared, never came back. And every once in a while, he'll pop into a meditation, but he's, as they say, he's traveled well in his passing, meaning that a lot of stuff has opened up to him. He was a very good person and a very, very advanced consciousness in many ways. And so after 11 months, no dream, no nothing, my father walks right into a meditation, crystal clear. As soon as he came in, I went, "Yo, that's really him." And he says to me, "Are you going to write a sequel to that book?" And then disappears. I come out of the meditation, I come out of the samadhi, I go, what the hell book is he talking about? Because I didn't know if he had read The Light of Darkness. I thought he was talking about The Stolen Child, which was a book he did read in 2012, and he enjoyed it. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And 3 days later, the Bob calls. And this is after, Bob and I stopped talking after The Light of Darkness. He was on the run for 2 years. I won't get into it. It's his story. He was being hunted by the FBI. He had every fucking conceivable human misery into his life for a number of things, but, partly for aiding me in writing the book, right? And telling things that as they say in the Bible, he was caught up into the third heaven and uttered things it was unlawful to say. So I hear from Bob after like a number of years, and he says, hey, it's time to write a book. Time to write another book. Now, remember, there's no such thing as coincidence. And so the meditation with my father, Bob calling 3 days later, I said, okay, well, this is the book my father was talking about. It's a sequel to The Light of Darkness, or a book in sequence to that book. So that was the genesis of The Devil in Us. Now, I brought in an editor because I wanted like somebody to anchor myself to. And I brought in a friend of mine named Anthony from Australia. And he was also a combat veteran, or a deployment veteran. I think he was a helicopter mechanic, but he had been in Afghanistan, seen the bodies going on the tarmac and everything. And he had some PTSD and some other stuff, and he wanted to write a book or work on a book with me, and he thought it would have some healing value. And so did Bob, actually, and they had that in common, that they were both soldiers, right? So we would have these three-way calls, and Bob would just be Bob. I mean, he would just say it plainly, not sugarcoat it, not create a euphemism. He would just tell you like it is. He said to Anthony, he said, okay, Anthony, we're going to be working with the devil and the demonic legions in this book. Are you okay with this? And Anthony would go, he was about 51 at the time. And he would go, all right, sure, mate. Yeah. And then after these three-way calls, I'd have one-on-one calls with Anthony. And he'd go, is this guy fucking nuts, Bruce? Anthony had read The Light of Darkness. And I said, no, Anthony, he's not nuts. If he says that he's going to set us up with a demonic muse to help us with the book, he's going to set us up with a demonic muse. And sure enough, in my meditation, this dude comes in who became the principal muse for me. I call him Creeper. And he's, as I described you, about 9 feet tall. I won't tell you what he was wearing. It was robes, but... And he stayed with me through the whole book. I can still call him in every time. I literally have a demon I can talk to, right? But I don't, because it's just, he's got work to do, man. I don't want to bother him. I'm just a human. I'm just a human. But so this book started, and Creeper started taking me on these nocturnal dream journeys. And he would wake me up every night so I remembered. And he showed me everything that was going on in the world. Everything. And how it was... basically, when you read The Devil in Us, you're reading a book in which... This is the way to think of it when you read The Devil in Us. You're reading a book that is a cosmic legal case, or a legal brief put before the human race as an artifact of evidence that the demons are not responsible for the state of the world, that it's man that has done this, and man under the influence of things outside of the original cosmology, outside of the angel-demon cosmology. Okay? And that's it. That's the way to read the book. That's the way to understand it. And some of those dream journeys were really freaky. I went to one of the underground, I don't know, city, base, I don't know what it was. Like the dream started with me there. And, you know, I didn't come in from above and float down and go through a tunnel. I couldn't tell you where it was in the world. But I saw what they do in those underground places. And it's perverse. It is like a human created hell. Right? It's everything in human history, like people killing each other, like all kinds of, for amusement, for other people, for amusement. And the dreams were a bit difficult to take. And then everybody close to me started calling me. my son, some friends from Canada, other people. And they were all saying the same thing. And they were saying, hey, I'm just calling you to tell you I had a dream with a demon. And I would say, why are you calling me? Well, you're the most spiritual person I know in terms of study, practice. Who else am I going to call? I said, well, the real reason you called me is the experience with the demon came through me because you're connected to me psychically, and I'm working on this book, and they went and visited you. And then I would ask about the dream. I would say, is it frightening? And they would say, no, in fact, it wasn't frightening. And in fact, they went out of their way to let me know they were a demon. I went, wow, that's interesting, right? Completely interesting. And the demons taught me that the way they've been handled and expressed by Christianity is abominable, and quite frankly, unjust. It's like, just imagine some Karen saying, and having some Karen saying, you know what? I don't want to live in a world with rats or cockroaches or spiders. Let's make a world without those things. Well, the world would fall apart. Do you know how much work those creatures do? They do an amazing amount of work in the ecosystem. Cockroaches. If all the spiders in the world were taken away, we would be overrun by insects in 5 years. Did you know that? If all the cockroaches were taken away, there would be nothing to eat the garbage and the decomposing whatever, and the maggots and everything that we associate with death. They have a job to do. Okay? They have a job to do, as do the rats. They have a job to do. Okay? And that's the way to look at the demons. And the Catholic Church, and I think they know what they're doing. I think it's intentional. I don't think it's accidental. But they have vilified this class of being. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you to go out and befriend demons. You will not have a pleasant experience if you try to do that, okay? But think of them like a necessary part of the psychosphere. That if they didn't exist and they didn't do their job, this whole thing would fall apart, okay? That's the way to think about them. That's about it. I'm going to move on to something else tomorrow. But I just thought I'd do a couple podcasts in Big Trouble in Little Limon and just share with you what I went through in the last 5.5 years writing these 3 books. Stardust Ranch, Light of Darkness, and The Devil in Us. And just think about like the education I was given in such a short period of time. Normally, to get all that information I assimilated, it would take 5 or 10 lifetimes. And this was all condensed into 5 years. And all of this study and learning was experiential and working with these invisible things. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.